it's about that time. Thank you so much for downloading today's episode of the Red Pill Investor. My name is Carl Krenzel, your host here today on this Red Pill, the 400th episode. Really? Woo-hoo. Man, I can't even believe we are this high. Hallelujah. Thank you so much for downloading today's episode of the Red Pill Investor, and I'll do my very best to give you the best information I can in the time that you're about to give me. Boy, I hope you've got a pen and paper, because today, as you can already tell, is not like a regular podcast. No, today, in honor of our 400th episode, I thought we would spend a few minutes on the topic of how to wholesale MLS property. Now, a few things to say in advance. This is not going to be a traditional podcast that I normally give. Instead, I'm going to offer to you a solid plan where you can take action on. Okay? Now, to do this, I'm going to need your cooperation. I don't want you to, just believe me. I want you to be an open-minded skeptic. Now, open-minded in the sense that you at least agree that it's possible to do. It's possible to wholesale MLS property. And skeptical in the sense that, does what I propose to you make sense to do? I want you to be skeptical about that. Now, if you can remain open-minded and skeptical for the next few minutes, I believe that I can add something of tremendous value to your life today. You see, it's my belief that MLS property can be purchased by a wholesaler, licensed or unlicensed, makes no difference, and subsequently assign that interest prior to closing. In other words, a wholesale deal, right? A wholesale MLS deal. Now, it's obvious that you can buy it off the MLS, close it with transactional funding or hard money, and double close. Okay, that's easy. But how do you, take a property that is currently on the MLS and have a seller agree to a lower price and then subsequently sell that interest for a profit, all the while, under the noses of the agents, the title, the attorneys? How do you do that? At the minimum, I think you'd agree with me, it's a tougher sale. So tough, in fact, that most people don't even try it. They say, oh, it's listed, that's okay, we don't want to deal with it if it's listed, we don't deal with listed property or whatever. However, for those who are unafraid of the uncharted waters that are the MLS, then please allow me to guide you. If you've got a pen and you've got a piece of paper, I've got several points I want to share with you today that I believe are going to help answer the questions in your mind, the open-minded skeptic. Point number one: the quality of your experience is measured by the quality of your questions. The quality of your experience is measured by the quality of your questions. Now, you might be thinking to yourself, you know what, won't the agent stand in the way? Or, maybe you might be thinking, well, the MLS people, all they want, they all want too much. See, these are largely mindset questions, which we'll address in a few minutes. Don't worry about that. Maybe another set of questions percolating in your brain might be, okay, Carl, fine, I believe you. You can flip MLS property. Sure, it's possible. But how do I find them? When there's so many properties on MLS, and wouldn't the agents themselves want to take all the deals? Or maybe you might want to ask this question where you're saying, well, what kind of contract would I use? See, that's a different level of understanding, you see. Maybe some other questions that you might be thinking about would be, well, fine, if I know how to write the contract and I know how to find them and all that, well, who in the world is going to buy a wholesale MLS property? And more importantly, how am I going to close it? Because if I can't get it closed, what difference does it make? See, these are all valid questions, and we'll address these questions in just a few minutes. But before we do, let's talk about some of the benefits as well as the drawbacks to wholesaling MLS property. Otherwise, if you don't believe there's any benefit in it to you, well, what's the purpose of learning all the other stuff? So if you got a pen and a paper, write down point number 2, the advantages of wholesaling MLS property. You see, the most obvious benefit is there's more deals available. I mean, literally, unless you're in a very small town, there's literally thousands of homes that are available on your multiple listing service. And let's just pretend that only 10% were distressed. Out of 1,000, that's 100. How many do you need? Listen, another obvious benefit, buyers who buy MLS deals, they don't always consider this ARV myth that you've been told. They don't always follow that. To them, if it's cheap on MLS, many times it's a deal. It's a question of perspective. Another advantage, depending on your level of access to the multiple listing service, you've got the ability to look at the listing and the history of it for any price reductions, previous offers, or previous listings. See, this data strengthens your negotiation position. If you can see that they've reduced the price again and again and again, it's been on the market forever and blah, 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 you can deduce a lot from that. For most MLS deals that you wholesale, there's already a preset buyer's list. That's another advantage that you may not think about. I mean, isn't it great to know that there's buyers in that area who would buy your property and you don't have to go look for them? Wouldn't it be nice to have a preset buyer's list? MLS properties have that. Okay, Carl, how do you do that? Okay, great. I'm glad you asked. The previous cash sales in the area are available on MLS. You can see who bought property in that area for cash recently. Simply search them and call them, using our scripts. Call them or call their agents. Point number 3. It wouldn't be fair to talk about all the advantages of wholesaling MLS property if we didn't talk about some of the disadvantages, which there are some. First, it requires a huge mindset shift. And one that's many can't or will not make. Listen, it requires a level of business maturity. Do you think for a moment that IBM doesn't try to sell IBM computers in Cupertino, California, the home of Apple? Of course they do. Listen, to flip MLS property, you got to be a grown-up in the business. You see, the disadvantage is that if you don't take the time to try and do it correctly, well, you stunt your growth as an investor. You're not living up to your full potential. I mean, there are vast swaths of business that are passing you by while you desperately send out yet another mailer that falls on deaf ears, simply because you will not learn how to find, negotiate, or create a deal on MLS. When I think of that, I think of it's a lot like a fly banging your head against the window time and time and time again until it dies, never fully realizing freedom lies feet away if it would only change its mind. Point number 4. Let's get into the nitty-gritty. We've talked about the whys in the house. Let's talk about the how now, right? Point number 4. Won't the agent stand in the way? You see, the truth is some will and some won't. Many times it depends on you. You see, you got to remember, life is about your attitude, your approach, and your expectations. That's what my coach, Mike Ferry, taught me, right? And in this particular circumstance, what is your attitude towards that listing agent? Are you thinking they're going to be super helpful? Do you think they're going to be friendly? Do you think they're going to be eager to work with you? Or do you think that they're going to automatically dismiss you and hate you and not want to work with you? What's your attitude towards them? And more importantly, what is your approach? Are you approaching them as a buyer, or are you approaching them as an investor? There is a huge difference in the agent's mind. Buyers, principals, people who are writing contracts, signing contracts, making money happen, those people get preferential treatment. Investors, many times, they have this preconceived notion you're going to send out tons and tons of mail and tons of offers and blah, 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 big wasting of time, right? What is your approach when you're talking to them? What is your expectation from this encounter? What would a real buyer expect? If you were buying a property, not to wholesale, but to actually hold on to for yourself, or perhaps to move in, what would you expect? How would you act? In the Red Pill Sales System version 5.0, the script book, we've got a script to help you locate a helpful agent, as well as dialogues to help with that conversation. We'll talk more about that in a minute. Point number 5. They all want too much. They all want too much, right? Speaking as an investing broker and realtor with 18 years experience, listing property, selling hundreds of homes on 2 coasts, I can assure you of 2 things. Number 1, not everybody wants the most. Number 2, oftentimes the best deals are the ones that you create yourself. You see, in the first circumstance, people put their home on the multiple listing service because they think many times that's what they're supposed to do. The home, somebody died, whatever, they think, okay, well, we're supposed to find an agent, that's what we're supposed to do, and they do it. Other times, they're trying it themselves. They got some sort of agent that's put it on the multiple listing service for them for $500 or something, right? And they're just using it for exposure. The point is, they're not always in it for the money. In the second circumstance, the best deals are the ones you create yourself, right? What mistakes and motivation do you see on the multiple listing service? I mean, when you think about it, estate sales, divorces, imminent foreclosures. These are all valid pieces of information that are available from the multiple listing service and its participating agents. So finding a motivated person is a matter of, taking the time to make the call or preview the home to get the questions answered. Now, when I'm thinking about mistakes, and I'm reminded of a property at 1844 South Rosemont here in Tucson. Now, here's why I bring this up and why I'm using my real name. It's because I want to have you be able to verify the truth of what I'm telling you. See, I don't just walk the walk, I talk the talk. And I talk the talk and walk the walk. I'm going to give you valid proof of what I'm telling you is true. I saw this property on the multiple listing service for $225,000. It was a half-occupied fourplex, which was a short sale. The mistake, is threefold. First, the price is way too high. It's never going to sell at that price. Cap rates are way too wrong, right? Second, that had tenants, which made showing very, very difficult. If you can't show it and it's overpriced, it's not going to sell. Third, it was a short sale. That provides the motivation. What I ended up doing was I made an offer on it for $110,000. That's 50% of the value. And I settled it at $115,000. Now, a few months later, I signed it at $115,000. Now, the bank, a few months later, came back and agreed to do it at $115,000 with the knowledge that I might assign it. Now, a few days later, I assigned it for $125,000 and actually ended up double closing the property. Now, the purpose of me demonstrating this is not to talk about flipping a short sale, which is, honestly, very difficult and many times illegal, okay? But it's to illustrate three things. First, the severity of the price difference. I ended up purchasing it at 51 cents on the dollar, 51% off the MLS price, with the agent's knowledge. The fact that it was on MLS. You can go to this day and still find it. You can see that it was listed with agents. And the third was no matter what, the best deals are often created. Point number 6. How do you find them? Okay, great. Fine, you did it. Okay, great. How do I do it? How can you find them, right? Point number 6. Well, obviously, if you got multiple listing service access, well, then it's simply a matter of setting up automatic searches for keywords or geographical areas that you know are particularly hot. Now, what I'm about to tell you is obviously not as a complete list, nor is perfect, but will require your fine-tuning for your area. And at the minimum, I would recommend the following keyword searches in your remarks, in the agent remarks, in the MLS. Or the public remarks, either way. Keywords like handyman special, estate sale, divorce. Now, agreed, divorce probably will never come up, but you never know. There might be a new agent out there, right? Fix up, must sell. Keywords like this in the remarks of the MLS will let you know about properties on an automatic basis daily, so you know about them as they come on, so you can track them and see if that's something you want to make an offer on or whatever. Another way is through daily previewing of vacant homes. I mean, if you're an agent, you should be doing this anyway, so you know what the market is. Another way, looking for obvious mistakes and motivation on the multiple listing service. Things like disease, death, distress. These types of searches are commonly available on your public version of MLS if you can work it that way. And agents can set up keyword searches for you, and you can use our script book to learn how to get a friendly agent to help you with this. Point number 7. What kind of contract do you use? You see, as it's a listed property, okay, you can't get around the listing agent, okay? And you really wouldn't want to anyway. You know, it's good business to respect listing contracts. It's just good business. You don't want to be known as that guy, right? And honestly, anybody who would teach you to break a contract between parties has kind of questionable ethics. I mean, if they're willing to do that to someone else, well, what are they willing to do to you? Bottom line, you got to honor contracts. You know, work within the contracts, right? Use an agent of your own. You know, hopefully, you know, you've got one that you've been referring business to because, you know, obviously you've got sign calls and things you can't work with, you can't deal with, whatever. You're sending those over to that guy as a free referral. That way he gets some business, hopefully. And in return, he gives you comparables. He writes offers for you, whatever. You know, if you've talked previously to the seller, let's say they called you off a sign or an ad you ran or something like that, well then, you know what? Politely explain what happened to the agent and that, you know, let them know, hey, listen, guess what? The seller, you know, wanted to keep you in on the deal. That's going to make them feel a lot better when you're writing up that contract, right? Now listen, if you're not familiar with the seller, let's say you've not spoken with them, well then your negotiation style has got to be a little bit different. The typical MLS seller will not understand your MAO offer. No matter how hard you try to justify it, it's just not going to work, right? To the seller, there is absolutely zero reason why you should get a $5,000, $10,000, or whatever more dollar check, right? Since it's impossible to convince them to do it, well, then don't even try. You just piss them off, right? Instead, base your offer on what I call MLS MAO. MLS MAO. Now, you might be asking yourself, okay, great, now he's gone off the deep end. What is MLS MAO? MLS MAO is the maximum allowable offer a cash buyer would pay for a similar property on MLS. You see, people who buy property on MLS many times do not feel or know about MAO, but if they see something that's cash on MLS, they can say, well, this other guy paid something similar to this price for cash, well, I'll pay that too. That guy is a great person to sell your property to. And there's a lot more of them than you think. Point number 8, which leads us to who would buy a wholesale MLS property. You know, using this MLS MAO, okay, let's say that you know, all right, that the lowest price anyone has ever paid on MLS, that is, in the past 6 months is X. If you get it below X, it has value. Depending on how much below X it is, you know, the more value it has, and it's easier to sell. So who would buy this? Well, first, realtors come to mind. Realtors and their past clients. The cash buyers who've purchased in the past 6 months in that area. Again, that's available on the multiple listing service. You can look that up. Who else? Semi-retail buyers. You know, people who pay cash for, you know, a second home or a home for their kid to go to college or something like that. You see, how you sell it is the same way you would sell any other. You would arrange a group showing at your buyer of all your buyers at the property to do a simultaneous inspection on, you've got probably a 5, 10, 20, 5, 10, 15 day of inspection period. You do the inspections all on one day. This technique is what I call the blitzkrieg technique. I describe it in pretty great detail in our newsletter at 10-Minute Skill, the 10-Minute Skill newsletter. You might want to consider checking that and joining that if you haven't already. Point number 9. How to close the MLS deal. Okay. Let's assume that I have sold you so far on the ability to do it, the ability to find it, you know how to put it under contract. But now there's this question, you kind of sold me so far, Carl, but what about this issue of these buyers and actually getting to close, and how does this all work at the end? How does it all tie together in a nice neat bow? Let's put it all to bed. Point number 9, how to close the MLS wholesale. Listen, in order for you to do this successfully, you got to start with the end in mind. Let's start with a few presumptions, okay? First, that they're motivated and that they must sell. Okay, it's none of this, oh geez, we'd like to sell, gosh, we want to sell. No, they have to sell. Either there's an impending foreclosure, maybe it's maybe not a short sale, but let's say that it's tax lien foreclosure, let's say it's estate sale, whatever it is, right? They have to sell. Number 2, they must be under contract and offered for sale under the MLS price. So we're assuming here, have a little presumption that you've got them under contract, you're offering it out for sale under the listed price on MLS. We're going to presume that, you've told them that you're an agent, if this is applicable, right? And in your contract, the next presumption is that somewhere in the additional comments, you probably written something like, I don't know, the buyer shall not reside in the premises, but shall lease, rent, assign, or repair for a profit. You've written that down in the contract somewhere, especially in the additional comments, right? You made a pawn shop presentation. Again, checked the script book for that, right? Thereby eliminating the discussion of justifying your price. The next presumption, they've looked at the comparables, they see what's going on, and that they've signed the contract. Their agents help them, and that's that, right? You've now gone out, you sold it as you would any other contract. Now you can use a simple one-page assignment. Now, when anyone questions you, you can truthfully say that you told them that it was an option, that you put it in writing, and now you're doing it. So as long as you disclosed it in the beginning, that it was a possibility, the seller signed on it, you wrote it into the additional comments, the language that you wrote in the additional comments supersedes the boilerplate language of the contract. So long as it's legal in your state, you now have an assignable contract and you're good to go. Again, check with your attorney for specific information, because I'm not one. But in conclusion, the question was, can MLS property be wholesaled for a profit? The answer to that is a very clear and resounding yes. Can MLS property be wholesaled by agents and non-agents alike? You bet. Is wholesaling a net listing? Absolutely not. In order to be successful when you're wholesaling property, you must stop thinking of yourself as an investor in the A to B sales environment. Put your hat on, your buyer hat on. What would a real buyer, a real principal do? Real buyers don't go out and make hundreds of offers on MLS at 10 cents on the dollar. They're very strategic. Ask yourself, would a buyer do this? Hopefully these ideas have been helpful to you. Thank you so much for being a part of our 400th episode. If it's been helpful to you, please do me the honor, share it on your social networks, pay it forward, and I look forward to helping you in the future. Have a powerful sales day. Bye-bye.